So I think we're going to crack straight on so that no one can leave. They can stay and enjoy this next conversation. And we're going to move the shift slightly from global to a more regional conversation. I'd like to introduce on our panel Ashish, Thakkar, founder and managing director of Mara Group, Mohammed Kateeb, group chairman and CEO of Path Solutions, Iqbal Khan, CEO of Fjar Group, sorry, I can't get my words out, that's all the talking I'm doing, and Kola Karim, chairman of the board for Shoreline Group. So basically, I'd like to start with Iqbal. You know, we talk about pre and post-COVID, and you actually point out that we're still going through it. We're during COVID. You know, what are our priorities?
Well, I think the world has gone through what we call the BC era, before COVID, 2020, early 2020. And then we are now what we call the DC era, during COVID. And let us not forget that we are still in COVID. Community spread is still increasing, the numbers keeps on, the virus keeps on mutating. And obviously there is a world which will come, AC world, which is after COVID. But COVID has upended the way we live, the way we work, but it is also going to bring a new economic, political, social order. And hopefully, definitely will make the world a better place.
With, you know, one of the things coming is obviously inflation and the impact of that, and it is coming. You know, what should we look out for?
I mean, inflation is coming because we've got the basic 101 of economics, too much money, chasing too few goods. And the supply chain logistics are being impacted in a very significant manner across the world. All that is impacting the economic climate. And then the forces of political misalignment, China and India, US and China, USSR and others, that is also creating. And I think what COVID reminds us that we are one human family. And we have to respond as humanity because this is the only planet which we have. And we have messed it up so much. So COVID has come as an opportunity to reset the political, economic, social system, the way we live, the way we work, and the way we invest. And I believe there will be great opportunities to build and invest in the emerging technologies in other areas.
Kola, you know, what are the risks to emerging markets?
The biggest problem that we see today is part of the discussion yesterday. Mr. Schwartzman said it. It's not been, the discussion is not centered and fusing in Africa. And African leadership needs to take note now, more so the emerging markets. The pandemic has created a global distortion of energy. And energy consumption is the growth of any society. And if we see where we are today and looking at where prices are versus where prices were during the pandemic and where prices are going, the alarm bells should be on. The Western economies are big, resilient enough to try weather that storm. Still, there are problems. So you can imagine the cracks in African economies if we're not thinking and leadership is not involved in the global rethink of this. We're going to have crisis on our hands. If you look at the cost of fuel today on the streets of African nations, if it continues the way it's going, you can imagine what that pressure will be in a lot of these societies.
What have we taken away then from the disruption of operations within the industries that you're involved in? Should we ever face anything like this again?
The biggest problem is we need to, in a global order, have a strategic rethink on how to confront if we do have a pandemic like this again. First, with what happened last year, there was a huge panic. For over 15, 16 months in the energy space, there's been no investments in exploration and production. That is a colossal problem. With time, and that is where we're going to see, like everyone's saying, we're not too far away from $100 price per barrel oil. Now, for economies that are producers, like in the Middle East, that's good news. But economies that are consumers of energy, like in poor African nations, That's huge problems. Remember, most of the African nations today have the population dynamics of over 60% under the age of 30. We're asking for trouble.
Ashish, I'd like to bring you in here. Obviously, you know, in your experiences of the landscape in Africa is very different again to what we were hearing on the previous panel. Can you share your insights and what you've seen, but also on reflection of that? Have you pivoted your business as a result?
Thank you, Jane. It's an absolute pleasure being here with you all. So yeah, absolutely. I fully agree, and it's a great question because, you know, we're smartphone manufacturers. We're the only true manufacturers of smartphones in the Middle East and Africa. And what we realized is during this period, to Kola's point, and Iqbal touched on it as well, which is there needs to be a shift. There needs to be more of a cohesive strategy. And I think the way that comes about is also creating ecosystems. So the way we've pivoted as a business is rather than just box pushing and creating smartphones, it's creating a device as a service ecosystem in which we can actually create a bunch of other services alongside the device, on the device, preloaded, packaged. So that way people have the ability to get digital education, to have digital healthcare, to have access to agricultural efficiency initiatives, true financial inclusion by digital banking, access to insurance services, etc. The issue right now is that all those services are out there, but when we package it and present it, when we talk about remote working, it's a really fancy term in the developed markets, whereas in emerging markets, people don't have the tools to work remotely. If we had the tools, if we had the ability to do it, and connectivity is still expensive, but it's become a lot more affordable, and connectivity is available everywhere. The challenge now is making sure people have the right devices, people have the ecosystem on it, what they use those devices for. And I think if we package that in the right way, that can be massively impactful going forward in terms of thinking about where kids left school in emerging markets, especially in our continent, and when they come back to school a year later, and what happens in that time, and what happens to them in that respect. Whereas, you know, if they had the digital tools at their fingertips, that would truly enable that difference to take place.
We heard in the previous session, and we were talking about how it's not so much about returns and investment, but making sure, like you say, everybody survives. You know, your work throughout your foundation work and stuff, you know, how, in terms of resilience, protecting people and profits, you know, how do we do that?
No, you're absolutely right, and it's so important. You hit the nail on the head, which is it is about protecting people and protecting profits, right? It's how we create that combination. And we've seen in this time, you know, people have lost lives, people have lost livelihoods, people have lost health, be it mental or be it physical. But I think this is an opportunity for us not to just catch up for where we were and get back to where we were as a global community, as Iqbal said. But it's more about also making sure that we kind of build ourselves and structure ourselves and position the new systems in a way that are resilient in the real sense, and actually have the ability to do more than what we were doing previously. Because it's not about just catching up, it's about making sure we're ready for tomorrow.
I'd like to bring in Mohammed Kateeb. Mohammed, thank you for joining us as well. You know, obviously your background is Islamic finance, but you're also a technologist and a huge believer in the fourth industrial revolution. Where does that play when we talk about sustainability?
Thank you for having me. I actually have different perspective on all these discussions about COVID-19, because I do believe that the world has started a revolution about 10 years or more before that, and the financial crisis of 2008 accelerated the changes in the world, especially in the financial sector, with the appearance of the fintechs. And the world was going through a few things that the fintechs brought to the financial market, which is the dematerialization, where everybody was doing digital transformation and changes in their business model, demonetization, where everybody's talking digital and cryptocurrencies, and democratization, where a lot of the middlemen and were actually disappearing, and you were able to do payment to payment globally. and you reach your audience directly without all this bureaucracy in the middle. And all that caused empowering the individual. And one very important characteristics of all this revolution was actually the usage of data strategically. So the data became the most important asset, and everybody was collecting data. The financial industry collected data for many, many years, but really never used it strategically. But then the fintechs comes in and use this strategically. All this was going on and a lot of excitement. I actually had a presentation in 2016, 2017, and I was talking about the fourth industrial revolution, the social revolution, and the changes that's happening in the world, the political issues between China and the US and all that. If I did the presentation today, I probably would not change much of it. Then COVID-19 came, and really what COVID did is accelerated the whole process. So basically, it's just pushed everything, and instead of having another 5 to 10 years to actually to transfer our workspace, the way we work, to remote, to actually change the way we construct our buildings, the way we work with our environment, it actually forced it to happen right away because we have a pandemic that's impacting everybody. So I do believe the technology revolution, which has only happened, the industrial revolution happened only 4 times in the humankind history, is a very important element that we should not lose sight of. And we have to actually look at COVID-19 as, yes, it came and accelerated it, but you have to look back and look at the last 15 years and look at the amazing things technology happened. When you talk about sustainability, I believe most of the sustainable issues, and sustainability, yes, it's about the climate, but it's also about social issues, about governance, and all those can actually be resolved by technology. I do believe, and I never ignore the human element of any discussion, but I do believe that technology in this revolution is the driving force, and what we are able to do in healthcare, in solving solutions, even the climate. If you look at the carbon technologies to decrease the carbon in the air all around the world is amazing. So I do believe technology plays a critical role in solving our sustainability issues and help us move forward in the world. And this accelerated by COVID-19.
With that technology also comes something else, and this is something, Iqbal, you're very passionate about, and you believe one of the biggest risks we face moving forwards is fraud and systematic fraud. Cybersecurity, we're seeing isolated leakage incidents, but what happens if there's a coordinated one? What then will happen to liquidity values?
Well, all around the world, as we shift from the analog world, analog industries to digital industries, the transformation is taking place in piecemeal. So the front office is being modernized in some institutions, some of them are giving middle office, but the business process alignment and the integrated back office, middle office, and front office alignment is not taking place. We have a lot of legacy system, and Mohammed would know this better than me, which are arcane, which are old, which need upgrading in a very big way. And many of our worldwide financial systems like SWIFT, like CEDEL, Euroclear, many of our stock exchanges have got legacy systems, and they are not very well integrated. If there is a cyber attack on those things, this could really bring down the financial system in a big way. But linked to that also, we need to upgrade our human capital. We need to build capitalism with a moral perspective. Martin Luther King used to say that through our technological genius, we have made the world a neighborhood. But we must use our moral genius to make it a brotherhood and come up with global responses. And that is really the issue. There is no them, it's all us. And COVID has brought this reality to home. There is no them. In every society, every country, there is only one us. And if we do not come up with a coordinated response, piecemeal responses will not get us there.
Kola, what are your thoughts on that as well? I mean, do you think that it is something that needs to be tackled in unison?
Look, the pandemic has shown global connectivity. We're so close. We're much more closer than being far apart. And that, for me, should be the sing-song of everyone. Look, at the end of the day, if we do not have a coordinated response, you're going to find people lacking because you cannot be self-sustaining alone. So if you think about what's happened in the United States, the Americans banned Europeans from coming into the United States. I think the 8th of November is the date that you could travel. But really, if the coordinated situation in the vaccination program is not pushed across board, you cannot be isolated. So we're so connected. It brings me to another very important thing. I think the pandemic has shown how self-centered leadership in some way could be. But if we're not acting in unison, it's a waste of time. So where I'm going is, if you look at the first world, if you're not helping to push the vaccination program into the developing world, these people are not cut out from the world. They still have to move from place to place. So it means you're still not safe with everything you're putting in place. So a coordinated, unified approach is the only systemic way of dealing with anything.
Ashish, you agreeing?
Absolutely.
I can see you nodding there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's so true. We are one community, right? And all these lines on the map just got blurred during this period. We saw how quickly this virus spread. And I think, to Kola's point, when any part of the world is going to get left behind, it's going to make all of us collectively as a community get left behind. So I think, to Iqbal's point, it is during. This isn't past. This isn't the past. It's literally something that we're still living in.
Mohammed, I mean, we've heard a lot of talk today about ASGs and, Islamic finance has with it a social element, which I guess plays very well with that.
Absolutely. If you look at the Muslim population in the world, we're around 1.8 billion to 2 billion, depending on who you ask, out of the 7.6 billion people. That's 25% of the population. But if you look at, for example, the unbanked, there are around 1.7 billion people in the world. The Muslim population is 50% of that. So we are actually 25% of the population, 50% of the unbanked. That's due to a lot of Islamic countries are not really included into the financial system because of economic situation. Islamic finance, if you look at the concept of Islamic finance, it's in its soul, it's very social, it's very ethical, it's asset-based. So Islamic finance did not really get impacted with the financial crisis in the 2008 because every asset is either backed by a physical asset, a real asset, or a service. So we believe that Islamic finance and social finance are the same, and because of the ethics of it, it all works for the humans and betterment. And I believe the only way you can go back to the financial inclusion and include all those people into the financial system. 50% of the unbanked people is through social finance and through Islamic finance, and the fintechs, which is the Islamic fintechs, that are coming in. And right now, they're very popular in countries that even don't have Islamic finance penetration. Like Indonesia is #1 country in fintechs today because the fintech model plays different model than actually the traditional finance, where they focus on the rich and the able, where fintechs actually increase the reach and the impact to the poor. So I do believe Islamic finance and is a social finance system, and I do believe the revolution that we're talking about will improve the financial inclusion, and it will help a lot the whole movement to reaching the financial. There is a lot of great instruments in Islamic finance that allow us to reach all those poor and unbanked people.
Would you say that ESG factors are compounded by drivers of future value? Is it fair to say that?
Yes, absolutely. I do believe that if you look at the 4 ESGs, the environment, the social, and the governance, one interesting thing I want to mention about Islamic finance, it's probably the most regulated Islamic financial system of anything, because we have the Sharia boards, on the banking level, on the government level, they actually oversee the system. And we see also on the social, we talked about the social inclusion, on the environment, even Islamic finance, we have a lot of investments today, like the green bonds, Islamic bonds, and which is the sukuk, and other instruments. We have about $500 million got invested last year in green technologies. So I do believe moving forward, Islamic finance will play a very important role towards sustainability.
I guess with all of this, what we've been discussing, we have to be optimistic and look that, there is opportunity that comes with it. Should we be looking at rewards, and where should we be looking?
Well, I think Islamic finance clearly is a very important area. It's a C2B business. It's the consumers who have driven the growth of Islamic finance. And Islamic finance has done a very good job in the banking space. But the future of Islamic finance will be determined by what they do in democratizing investments and democratizing philanthropy. Those two aspects are, and therefore bringing greater authenticity. With inflation coming, as we've talked earlier, people need to have greater savings, otherwise their purchasing powers will go down. So it's very important to democratize investments and philanthropy and give people a line of sight to their own protected futures, especially for the pension funds, endowment funds, Awqaf, to give them that opportunity to have in real purchasing power the ability to do more for their people.
I'd like to throw that slightly over to Ashish and to you, Kola, as well. Where are you guys looking at opportunities moving forwards?
So yeah, just on that point of ESG, and I think it's such an important element that it's no longer an optionality. I think it's the only way business is going to be sustainable, and equally, as we were discussing earlier, the whole sustainable development goals and ensuring that these 17 goals are still focused on with the target of leaving no one behind by 2030 is a really, really important element, right? I think in Africa, the way my experience across the 26 countries we've been very present in is that governance and compliance has drastically improved and increased over the period, over the last few years. I think governments have become a lot more investor friendly, and as a result, the ease of doing business in a lot of these markets has become a lot better. The way we cannot generalize a continent negatively, we can't overly generalize it overly positively either, because we do have a few cases here and there. But as a whole, the continent has really transitioned. And when you think about the next big opportunity, Mohammed touched on, 50% of unbanked population. When you look at Africa, 1.3 billion, fastest growing in terms of population, but also 6 of the 10 fastest growing economies. And with all those statistics, still 70 to 80% of our continent is unbanked. And that just shows you a massive opportunity, because we've got mobile money. The continent created mobile money. But now taking that to the next level of real financial inclusion through digital banking, I think is a huge opportunity, which I'm very excited about.
I think going from what Ashish just said, the three silos of what we see as the pockets of growth, taking Africa again, it's one, infrastructure. The only continent you find dirt of infrastructure is on the continent of Africa. So there's some massive opportunities from roads, rail, bridges, power, water. So with a huge, fast-growing population, big pocket. The second area, and a huge one, is financial inclusion. We need to be connected to the global world. Very young, youthful population. You now see unicorns in fintech blowing up all over Africa. And this is Flutterwave, 3 billion valuation out of Nigeria. Amazing story. Kuda Bank. These guys are coming up with amazing innovation, young and youthful. The third big pocket area is fast-moving consumer goods. Because as this population is very young, they need youthful, modern stuff. And that shows the connectivity to the global world. So these are huge opportunities that we see going on. But the ES part of the G, going from what Ashish has talked about, the G, this areas actually helps buttress that point. Environmental. Today, being in the construction business, there's a lot more cognizance around equitable principles when we're doing projects. So we're working with global standards from day one. No better place to benefit than the continent of Africa. If you talk about the S itself, that is huge because those are the core values of where relationships from government comes in with relationships with the companies and corporates. And hopefully the future looks brighter if the world works in a cohesive, inclusive way because we're more connected than being divided.
I think the timeline keeps popping up. You know, that is one of the key components here, is everything is pushing on so quickly. You know, what systems need to be immediately implemented to ensure what you say happens, but also in terms of economies looking to normalize, you know, and where you're seeing this growth?
I think leadership needs to communicate better now. We cannot have a situation where the Europeans are making one decision, the Asians are making another decision, then the Africans are left to make another decision. We need to work in a globalized, cohesive world to make sure we're getting and expecting the same results. That is the big outlook of what the pandemic has driven the world to. And that's where leadership needs to take that cohesive approach in making decisions.
I asked this to the previous panel. I'm going to quickly round off because we've only got a couple of minutes. But, you know, what personally did each of you take away from this steep learning curve that we've had over the last 18 months to 2 years? I'll start with you.
I do believe that COVID was a huge learning experience for all of us. I was anticipating this, all the learnings in COVID to actually happen in 10 years, and it got compressed into 18 months. Myself, running a company, the way we do business is completely different. We were actually able to implement a full core banking system with one of our customers remotely and actually take them live. That's, to me, what is unheard of just before COVID, but it forced us to actually rethink our systems, rethink our all processes inside the company, and adapt to the new realities much quicker than what we actually were planning to. And it was an amazing learning experience.
2 quick points. COVID brought a realization that no problem can be solved at the level at which it was created. COVID highlighted the fact that this is a material problem, but it cannot be solved by material means. The world pumped in a huge amount of liquidity. We can do that, but we cannot create solvency. So COVID has highlighted that we have to rise above the problems and come up with a moral solution and build an alliance of goodness, because we only have one planet and one human family. To me, that is the biggest takeaway.
Ashish?
Yeah, I think it's a very good question. I mean, what has happened has definitely left a mark on everyone. Professionally, you hear of some really positive stories and you hear of negative. But on a personal side, I don't think anyone, directly or indirectly, has not been affected. It's left a mark. Now, it's up to us to collectively decide, based on our actions, of what kind of mark is this? Is this a scar of the past, or is it a tick mark of the future in terms of this is what we've learnt and this is how we're going to make sure this never happens again? And if it does, we're much more prepared and ready for this. So I think it's time to be bolder, bigger, and better.
Fab. Kola?
COVID has made a mark on humanity, and that mark is there forever. But the true position that just captures it, it's for us, it's a train that's left a station. It's going to stop, probably, but it's going to keep moving. So the true position is we all have to be diligent in everything we do and be more inclusive in our thought process as we get on with it, because humanity is just one, and we think as one.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for a fantastic chat. Enjoy the rest of your couple of days here in Riyadh. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen,